Good morning, everybody. So we are here with soon-to-be Dr. Dominic Okoliko, who will be doing a quick demonstration on using ATLAS for a literature review. For those who joined us at the previous webinar, you will know that we had a few connectivity issues, so we'd like to re-record the session so everyone can get all the information that Dr. Okoliko is going to show us. So over to you, Dr. Okoliko. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm sure the delegates are going to love this presentation by you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amarsha, and it is good to be back again. And maybe I should start with another apologies for the hiccups last time we tried to do this. Today it is promising, and we're going to have a good experience with the computer. So I want to start with the slide that we are seeing currently on the screen. And yes, I want to have a better control of this using the laser. So Brian is an astronaut, and he has this to say about doing research. He said, research is spending 6 hours reading 35 papers so you can write one sentence containing 2 references. I don't know about you, but this resonates very well with me in terms of my experience doing a PhD. And the thing is, you get to do a lot of reading so that you can understand the topic you are dealing with. And one thing you would realize is, as you deal with more information, the ability to retain the information becomes harder. And that is where utilizing a tool to do your reading of the literature becomes very important. So today, I want to share with you my own experience using ATLAS.ti to do literature review, and I'm hopeful that it will be helpful to you. Okay. So the title of my presentation is Conducting Systematic Literature Review in ATLAS.ti, an example from a PhD research. So I recently completed my PhD from the School of Public Leadership in Stellenbosch University. And part of what I needed to do was to delve into literature to understand the topic I was interested in doing my research in, so that it can give me a background and a launch to the kind of things I was to do. So, and I know for yourself too, who perhaps you're starting off or you're already familiar with conducting research, literature review is part and parcel of our life as academics. So, another meme, and by the way, let me drop this from the start that I'm a lover of meme. I collect them a lot, and I share them in my social networks. So I found this very interesting from academic memes. And this says, can't I just conduct research without doing a literature review? Well, if you have to say this to your mentor or your supervisor, you might get responses like, well, yes, outstanding move, but it is illegal. Basically, it is to say we can't avoid doing literature review, and I would tell you why now. If you are to do a research, the first thing you need to do is you need to provide foundational knowledge on the topic you are interested in. Maybe you are like me, who is interested in climate change communication, and you want to conduct a research in it. You would want to convince your examiners, your supervisor, your funder, the reason why what you want to study is important. And for them to have that understanding, providing some form of existing knowledge as a foundation is important. Also, you might want to identify key researchers in the field. Who are the important people that you would want to learn from in your own journey? Conducting research literature review would give you this pointer. The other one is you would want to understand what are the main ideas, theories, and controversies that already exist, so that you can join in the conversation. My supervisor told me when I started out the journey, he said, you are like someone who wants to enter into a conversation. And the first thing you would want to learn is you want to first identify who are the people on the table conversing and what are the conversations they are holding. That way you would be able to enter into the conversation, to engage them, so that you don't come in and start speaking off topic. So that's where literature review is important. The other one is you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to crack your head when there is already something simple out there for you to do. So you want to know what methodologies exist, what techniques exist that you can learn from and borrow from. And last of all, you won't want to reproduce what already exists. So you would want to identify the gaps that exist that you intend to fill. This is also important for if you are looking for funding. They will want to know what gap are you, why should we fund you? So identifying gaps in research is an important exercise for conducting research, and that is where literature review comes in. Again, another meme. So this one says, looking for that reference I swear I once saw. So it happened to me a lot of times before doing my review in the ATLAS.ti. So you have read something, and maybe for some reason or another you noted it somewhere, but now you are doing something else and you remember, oh, this theorist is important for me, but you can't put your hand to where you placed it. And the reason is because we are not very good with record keeping, and a tool that would help us with that becomes important. So why systematic review and why ATLAS.ti? Well, for systematic review, the interesting thing about it is it helps you to keep what you are doing in a systemic way. Firstly, it helps you to make explicit your methods. How do I identify what I want to review? And how do I select them? And when I have done the selection, how do I appraise them? All of these systematic review lays out the procedures that makes them very explicit, so that when you complete it, you reduce bias in your review. And with ATLAS.ti, basically it assures you that what you want to do systemically can be done with the tool that it provides, because it will help you to organize your records. And when you have done your analysis, you are able to retrieve, you are able to query even the literature. And when you're done with that, you can report them in patterns, the patterns that you identify in your data. So let's pay attention to what you need to keep in mind when you want to do systematic review. Firstly, you need to define what your research question is, so that you are not answering anything. Again, what is important about this is when you are doing your reading, it guides you so that you filter what exactly you want to look for in your literature. Then you need to come up with a strategy. How do I search what I want, the kind of records I want to review, the kind of literature I want to review? And you need to define it. It has to be predefined. And it should be comprehensive to exhaust possible outcome for the literature that you need to include in your review. It also needs to be objective, so that when another person needs to do it, they should be able to reproduce it. And that is what makes it an empirical study in itself. Unlike other literature review, it is an empirical study in itself. And when you've done this homework, then there should be a predefined eligibility criterion. What should I include? What should I exclude from my review? Lastly, there are existing protocols that would help you to assess the quality of your review, and depending on your field, this comes handy. The Prisma tool, for instance, is generally acceptable across bar. It is preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. And ATLAS.ti usually is well known in the medical field, measurement tool to assess systematic reviews. With ATLAS.ti, like I said, why it is important for these things you find in your left-hand side is ATLAS.ti would help you to organize your records when you've identified them. It will also help you to explore them with ease. And then when you're done with it, to retrieve information that you've explored and labeled, which we'll call later on as codes. And then when you're done, you visualize your analysis right in the desktop of ATLAS.ti before you can go on to export your results into different formats like PDF, Word, and Excel, and work with the results that you get from them. All right, now let me share with you my own experience, and my experience is already published work existing. You can look it up yourself. Mediated Climate Change Communication in Africa and Public Engagement, a systematic review of relevant literature. So my doctoral studies was divided into 4. So this was my first objective, and that's why it is called paper 1, the first paper in my work, published in African Journalism Studies 2020, together with my supervisor. So if you remember, we just said that you needed to have a question and it should be clearly stated. Well, what was the motivation for me for using systematic review? I wanted to understand the forms of discursiveness that shapes climate action in Africa. And specifically, I was interested in the kind of public sense making that exists in the media. So I looked at what already has been reviewed in the field, and there were existing literature reviews, including systematic and meta-analysis, but they were all at the global level. So all of them point to limited knowledge that exists for non-Western world, including Africa. But there was no clarity as to the extent of the paucity of research in the African context. And evidence wasn't there to tell us, especially whether this knowledge that exists, if there were any informed by worldviews and life world of the people who are living in Africa. So these were the specific objectives that I was interested in then. So my aim was to systematically review and describe the extent of growth and diversity, theoretical and analytical commitments, and the use of African perspectives in the body of literature that empirically examined media representation of climate change in Africa. So I had 2 questions. The first was, to what extent is there growth and diversity in the mediated climate change representation field within the African context? And for the second question, I was interested in whether there were theoretical assumptions that relates to the worldviews that exist in the African world, what I call African epistemic attributes. My criteria were then to delineate what I was interested in. So I was interested in empirical examination of research, not conceptual papers, not reviews. Only work that looks at empirically looks at existence of representation of climate change in the media. And then I needed to identify the sources. And you remember we said it should be comprehensive, possible outcome that you can get. So I looked to registries that would record published works. And one of them was Web of Knowledge, Scopus, EBSCOhost, Sabinet Africa, Journals, African Journalism Studies. And then I defined concepts that I was to use. It is not included in these particular slides that I've prepared, but basically there were things that discuss climate change and related words like greenhouse gases, and you need to define it. If you look at the paper published, you'll find my predefined concepts that I used in my search. Then there are 2 types of systematic review. There is qualitative synthesis and there is quantitative synthesis. I was not interested in quantitative synthesis. I was interested in qualitative synthesis. The difference is that for qualitative, you are looking at aspects of the literature that speaks to how people discuss issues, whereas for quantitative, you need to extract already results that were data that were utilized in a particular across studies, and then form collective evidence for the existing field. So I use which is the preferred reporting items to check my quality, and basically these were the procedures I followed, from identifying things in the registries, I had to do my elimination based on the criteria I've defined and ended up with 34 studies. Okay, at this level, at this point, I will take you to ATLAS.ti to share with you my journey then. The first thing is, when you have identified what, in my case, after identifying what my literatures were, I then went on to put them into Mendeley to organize for myself my papers, the record I have gotten. And when I've done my screening here, I came up with the exhaustive list that I was interested in. So I then export my record and give it a name. In this case, let me say webinar. And it should be in the EndNote XML files, basically. And then I saved my record and I went into my ATLAS.ti, created a project. Let's call it webinar again for review for SR. Yes. And let's give it some few minutes for it to come up. Sorry about that. All right. So you would have, we are in the ATLAS.ti window. I have created my project and I want to bring the record I have from my search. So because I want to bring it in from a reference manager, I make use of the import function in ATLAS.ti. And then I need to tell what exactly I want to have it first explored for me, an automatic exploration. Maybe I'm interested in knowing what the kind of authors, so that I know what the relevant or the key authors or researchers in the field. So I select first author and second co-author so that I know who are the frequent publishers. Maybe I also want to know how many, whether there are theses included in my review, journal, conference papers. So I want the type of literature to be there. Then I want to also see the progression of the year. Maybe I select that option as well. And then I go to where I placed my record, the exporting. In my case, it is here. And I select it to open it. And then I said import. So what is interesting about this first, if you do this very well, you would immediately have a very quick overview of the kind of interesting things you would want to find across literature. So the importation is happening. The kind of things we would be seeing when it is done would be, who are the key researchers in the field? We want to also see the range of years people that have published in the field, and also the type of publications that have been included. So for us to see this, we go to our document manager and we open it. And if you are with me, you would already see, remember my field is a very small field. There were 34 records that I'm looking at here. So So you might not find a lot of publishers, but already you see Locke has a higher frequency, and it tells you that, okay, he or she is regular publisher in the field. And when you scroll through, you might begin to see others who are published higher than, but definitely they're just lucky, or luck is a regular publisher here, and perhaps Gazetbo. Apart from that, we also talked about the type of literature that we have included. So we go to publication type. So in my case, there is one book chapter. Actually, in my data, it is not book chapter, but it is a report. So you can rename it a report from one of these institutions. Then I have book section and I have journal. So already you can take out some of this information to work with for yourself. The other one is which were the years that appeared regularly. 2012, 2013 had more publications, and over time it declined down to 1 in 2019. So the field is quite young. You can immediately see it started only in 2008. So basically this simpler information can make you a lot of interesting things for you. So I go into where I did my own particular literature now, or where my review, my own particular data, so that I show you some of the other coding I did. So another thing you can do would be exploring. You can explore your review, search and exploration. You go to regular search, for instance, and maybe you want to search all of the article. You select all of them. If you were interested in only searching by publication type and said, I'm interested in searching only journal articles at this level, you select it and you say continue. So it's going to select search only journal articles in your particular publication. Maybe you are familiar already from reading that a particular theory, let's say framing analysis, is what you want to see. What sort of things are being said about framing analysis? You select it. You could tell it to search only paragraphs or sentence level. Maybe you are interested in paragraphs, and you say show result. Already it tells you, it gives you immediately the kind of papers that have framing analysis. And if you want to code here, you can even apply code, or you can do your name, your labels here. If you say apply code, it will apply it across. But because it's already a finished coding, I would not want to apply it, instead to show you my coding stuff. So that's how you can do quick search with your literature. The other thing is, when you are done applying your codes in this case is label. And when you apply a code, let's say you are starting off, you do not want to do any of this automatic coding. You want to read the literature and apply specific things that you have identified you want to look for. In my case, let me open my memo so that I show you what exactly I was interested in looking at. So in my case, I was interested in knowing what publications exist across the years, what years the literature analyzed, the countries that were analyzed, and the media type that were analyzed, what sort of methods and designs these studies exist, and the institutions that the scholars who published in this particular field reside in. And then I was also interested in what theoretical applications exist, and in particular whether they had African epistemic attributes. So you can make use of your memo to keep your particular interest in mind when you do your coding. And so if you have that clearly in mind, then you can open each of the particular records you have and begin to read through. You read through, so I was interested in the year. So you come up with a particular text that tells you the year like this. You highlight it. Basically, you highlight as I did here. You right click and you apply your code. You say apply code. Year. If you type year, in my case, because it already exists, I'm not able to apply. And you apply. Let's say you want to do the same here. Maybe this is another year in another paper now, and you want to apply code. You say apply. You say year. You type the year. Let me type something else to give it a new code, and you click it. The code would apply, and it will treat it as a code. So code XXX. When next you see another information that is the same thing as XXX, you select the section of the text or image and you right click and you apply. If I look for XXX, since it exists here, I simply say entering. Let's say in another section I see another XXX. I select another option of applying the code would be to go to my code record here at the panel to my left. Look for X, drag it into it, and it would apply. Now, if you're done with all of your coding, which is the dirty work, the coding means applying label to sections of your text or your data. When you're done with it, there are other things you can do. Including exploring perhaps word cloud or visualizing your analysis in code document table, which is another interesting place you can work in. Let's say I want to see across the years how different theories that I've identified have been applied. So my coding the coding I did that had theory as prefix to it, I selected them. And I go to my view. Now it tells me the distribution of these theories across the years. My screen is small. Let's reduce this here. So you are able to see across the years how their distribution occur. And you would recognize with me that framing and agenda setting theory are the predominant across the years compared to things like political economy and discourse analysis and geography of environmental news. Basically, those are scanty representation. So it tells me that there are more people interested in agenda setting theory and framing compared to others. Maybe this kind of information is important for me. I can export to them either in Excel form or if I'm interested in Word form. So I'm exporting the information in Excel and then I can go with the information into Excel to work with it to generate graph or anything else that I'm interested in. Maybe because of time, I'm going to pause that, but basically it is a possibility you can do. Or maybe that's not what I'm interested in. Maybe after I've identified the predominant theory and I want to write about it, I might not need to go into the record again. Right here under my Explorer, I can select, for instance, this reference, and I'm able to see the particular section of the text, which is the quotation that is linked to the label, to the code I have. And I'm able to read here and go to my, where I'm writing my report, and begin to type the kind of ideas that exist for let's say, framing analysis, framing theory, as I have here. So that's one way to explore your records. There are other things you could do with analysis depending on the quantity of your record. But in my case, I had very few things. And if I had categorized them in terms of cases, for instance, like in my case, what I have as cases in my particular case would be the type of records I have, whether they were journal or book chapter, but you recognize, as I showed you earlier, that I had just one book and then two theses. So comparison across them will not make much sense. But if you had that kind of things, you can compare across like that. So basically, your tool, your analysis, you could do co-occurrence of codes. You can explore it, and you could do that with co-occurrence table, or you could do your exploration in code document table. And let's say you want to visualize certain things that you can begin to work with, especially using your Sankey diagram to show you the level of so you want to see what Sankey diagram can tell us about certain things. Let's say for the design type, maybe across the year again, you want to see what sort of designs have been used across the years, which one has become predominant. So you select what you have coded as design, and you go to your view panel, and maybe you are interested only in the Sankey diagram. You want to screenshot it to put it in your report. So you say you can reduce this panel to review your Sankey diagram. Basically, Sankey diagram reproduces what you have in the frequency table, and the width of these things are proportionate to the frequency of their occurrence in your analysis. So basically, if you take case study, for instance, and you select it, it tells you which year they were predominant and how they had reduced over the time. Or if you take comparative studies, again, you're able to visualize how they distribute across the years. And right at the panel here, you can begin to see which studies make use of them, and you can begin to write or make use of your screenshot and take them out into your report. You copy and you go and paste it into your result. So those are the kind of things you can do. Now, because of time, I was only interested in showing you some of the steps I took. Now I'm going to go back to our presentation and then share with you the kind of results that I generated from my analysis. When you've done your hard work in coding and you have done your export, you can then generate your result. So we are going back to our presentation. And right. You will be surprised. I told you ATLAS.ti would make your life very easy, right? But it appears a little bit complex in a way. At the start, when you're doing the hard work, it is. Well, you said ATLAS.ti would do it. I would say good work in ATLAS.ti would do your review for you. And when you have done your good work, you can have this kind of results that I generated in my case. The information I gathered, I took them into Excel to plot this graph to tell me what were the years that the studies were published in. This particular line represent that, and which years these studies analyzed in Africa. The years analyzed went back, whereas the years that the study started to show 2008, it only peaked in 2013. And the reason is because in 2011, Durban hosted a Conference of Parties 17 of the United Nations Climate Change Conference. And for that reason, publishers were responding, they responded more to that particular event. And the African field is younger in terms of what we found. So these guys found that the publication started early in the 90s, but in our case, we only started about 2008 to take climate change representation in the media serious as a research field. Then I was interested in what countries in Africa had been studied in my publication, and what I found were just 9 countries basically, with the dominance of South Africa and Nigeria. And again, the information I gathered, I took them to Excel to plot this map. Again, what countries were analyzed along with, in terms of comparative studies, along with African studies. They were quite general, from Europe to North America, Latin America. But in terms of that comparisons, again, 2 countries were the dominant. South Africa was more, and then Nigeria won. Other interesting things that I looked at, types of media that were analyzed, there were more interest in newspapers compared to other types like social media, broadcast media, and there were fewer qualitative studies compared to quantitative studies, and there were limited considerations for theories emerging from Africa. These were theories, only one looked at what you had the world views of the African people, the Ubuntuism, by Mary in 2013. So basically, when you've done your work, again, I did not show you how you could plot network trees to showcase your ideas. So I was interested in also what sort of model, how do the researchers look at communicating climate change in the media, what sort of models exist. And this was what they had and what my analysis was able to suggest for me in my second paper, by the way, not in the review. My second paper also published in a Journal of Media Ethics. So it's something you can do in ATLAS.ti. You connect theories that you found and create a model to explain the kind of interesting things that you want to explain to your readers. Okay, so just my parting words, and I created this meme myself. The idea is, hey, our love is like a literature review. You get it? And the idea is, literature review is complex, but when you can't avoid it. You just have to love it. And when you're done with it, it can be really romantic because it gives you a solid ground to launch your own research. So, and you might feel unsure about doing a systematic literature review or about using ATLAS.ti to do it. What I would tell you is try it. I was never grounded in any of the two. I did my training with ATLAS.ti with ADA in 2019, and I did these studies in the same 2019. Everything was, I learned as I journeyed on. I do one, it doesn't work, I revert to another, and I look up things, resources in the on YouTube and other places and ask questions. So give it a shot. The other one is automation is excellent, but only if you do the work. So if you don't do the work, you might be led misled rather in the kind of results you would be seeing even when you use ATLAS.ti. So some of the references that I used is what I provided to you, and I hope that you found them interesting yourself, and good luck with your work, and thank you very much for listening. Thanks. All right.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Dominic. Thank you so much. This is a great presentation, and I know those who missed it on our last webinar are definitely going to enjoy this. So thank you very much, and yeah, we will be in touch again. But thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Amasha, and thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.